When wildfires ravaged Los Angeles, many blamed nature. However, former President Trump discovered something far more sinister. In January 2025, Los Angeles was consumed by devastating wildfires, driven by strong Santa Ana winds. The flames destroyed vast areas, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. More than 10,000 structures were reduced to ashes, and the fires claimed at least 11 lives, forcing more than 180,000 residents to evacuate their homes. During the crisis, the Trump family visited California for a series of engagements. Barron Trump, now 18 and a student at New York University, accompanied his parents. While former President Donald Trump attended a fundraiser, Barron explored the city, intrigued by the disaster. The air was thick with smoke, creating a murky yellow sky. Barron began following news reports and social media updates. He noticed the destruction in areas like Pacific Palisades, where multimillion-dollar mansions were reduced to ashes and the former Will Rogers farmhouse was consumed by flames. Hey, everyone. Just a quick moment. I hope you're enjoying this story as much as I'm enjoying telling it. Bringing these incredible personalities to you is a true passion of mine. Each story is a piece of our rich American heritage, and I love sharing it with all of you. But to continue bringing more of these inspiring stories, I really need your help. If you like what you're seeing, please consider subscribing to the channel. By clicking that subscribe button, you'll be helping me reach more people and continue sharing these stories we love so much. And don't forget to give this video a like. Each like is a small show of support that motivates me to bring more quality content to you. Together, we can keep the memory of these personalities who shape our nation alive. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with me. Let's continue this journey together, exploring the stories that make the USA such a special place. Now, let's get back to our story and discover more about this fascinating personality. But one thing caught his eye, an unusual pattern in the locations where the fires started. While most people focused on the scale of the disaster, Barron noticed that the ignition points seemed to follow a deliberate path. He began mapping the locations of the fires using public information and official fire department reports. The more he mapped, the clearer the pattern became. The fires seemed to follow a sequence that suggested something beyond random occurrences or natural causes. Barron shared his findings with his parents, who, despite their concerns, encouraged him to follow his intuition, but with caution. Determined, Barron approached local authorities and fire experts, but his inquiries were met with skepticism. The officials, busy managing the crisis, had no time for the theories of a teenager, regardless of his family. Some dismissed his observations as coincidence, while others assured him that professionals were handling the situation. Despite the dismissals, Barron's conviction only grew. He decided to investigate on his own, unaware of the dangers that lay ahead. The scale of the destruction wrought by the fires was something Los Angeles had not seen in years. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to smoldering ruins, and the dark smoke turned the day into an apocalyptic haze. Emergency escapes were crowded with homeless families fleeing the flames. In areas like Malibu and Calabasas, symbols of wealth and security were reduced to piles of rubble. The streets were silent except for the sound of fire trucks and helicopters dousing the blazes. Nature suffered immensely, too, with thousands of acres of habitat destroyed and desperate animals fleeing to suburban areas. For residents, the situation felt surreal. The flames, driven by winds of up to 40 miles per hour, were spreading faster than containment efforts could keep up. Firefighters, already exhausted from battling previous blazes, worked around the clock. Images of them collapsing from exhaustion became symbols of the human cost of the heroic efforts to control the flames. Barron, however, was deeply affected by the stories he encountered. During a visit to an evacuation center in Santa Monica, he heard a distraught mother tell how she had only minutes to grab her children and flee before her home was engulfed in flames. Another man showed Barron a photo of his old car collection, now reduced to a pile of twisted metal. But what struck Barron most was a firefighter's story about the strange behavior and locations of the fires. "It's almost like they have a mind of their own," the man said, shaking his head. "I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never seen anything like it. Some of these fires seem to start in places you would never expect." These words reinforced Barron's belief that there was more to the fires than met the eye. He couldn't help but think about the strange alignment of ignition points he had noticed earlier. Determined to find out more, he spent hours scouring forums and social media, where he found posts from others who had also noticed unusual patterns in the fires. Some people speculated that the fires were the result of arson, while others floated more sinister theories, including corporate sabotage and attempts at forced land acquisition. One post in particular caught Barron's attention. A user had posted a drone video from an area outside Pasadena, showing what appeared to be an object falling from the sky moments before a fire broke out. The video, though grainy, was enough to get Barron's pulse racing. He saved it immediately, wondering if it might be the evidence he needed to prove his growing suspicions. But the more Barron learned, the more dangerous his questions became, leading him into a maze of uncertainty that offered no easy way out. As night fell in Los Angeles, Barron sat in his hotel room, his computer glowing in the darkness. His room was cluttered with notes, photos from social media posts, and a crude map of the fire's spread. He pored over the drone video he had downloaded, playing it back frame by frame. The object in question, a tiny glow, appeared for just a second before disappearing into the smoke. Moments later, the fire began. It was terrifying. While many fires are caused by lightning, faulty power lines, or neglect, this video suggested something unnatural. Barron cross-referenced the video with news articles and updates from the fire department, plotting the ignition points on his map. Each point lined up with uncanny precision, forming a path that stretched from rural areas to densely populated neighborhoods. Barron's curiosity turned to obsession. He turned to public records, tracking recent land purchases in areas affected by the fires. A pattern emerged. Properties in high-risk zones had been quietly acquired by several companies in the months leading up to the fires. Barron jotted down the names of the companies, most of which had little information available online. The more he investigated, the more questions arose. One company in particular caught his eye, Solvista Holdings. The company's name had been repeatedly listed in recent transactions for properties that had been destroyed by the fires. What stood out was that the purchases were made at inflated prices, an unusual move for areas prone to natural disasters. Barron felt the weight of what he was discovering. He called his older sister, Ivanka, to share his findings. "This doesn't make sense," he explained. "Why would someone pay that much for land in fire zones unless they knew something we didn't?" Ivanka listened patiently but remained cautious. "Barron, this sounds serious, but be careful. If you're right, this could involve powerful people who don't want to be exposed." Her words only strengthened Barron's resolve. The next day, he drove out to one of the affected areas, hoping to see the disaster up close. What he found shocked him. Amid the remains of homes and businesses, there were signs of anomalies. In one neighborhood, a row of trees stood untouched, while the surrounding homes had been reduced to ashes. In another, a concrete wall showed signs of anomalies on one side, but the other was eerily clean. Barron photographed everything, meticulously cataloging every detail. But as he walked through the ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A black SUV sat parked in the distance, its windows so dark it was impossible to see inside. It didn't belong to any rescuers. He was sure of that. Ignoring his insecurity, Barron continued his documentation, determined not to let fear stop him. He uploaded his findings to a secure cloud drive, ensuring that everything was recorded. Later that night, he shared his findings on a private forum, hoping to connect with others who might have noticed the same irregularities. Responses poured in almost immediately. Some users thanked him for bringing attention to the anomalies, while others shared similar observations from different parts of California. But one response stood out. A cryptic message read, "You are closer to the truth than you think. Be careful who you trust." Barron didn't know it at the time, but his investigation was beginning to attract the attention of people who were far from friendly. The cryptic message followed him as he sat alone in his room that night. The glow of excitement he had felt earlier gave way to an uncomfortable awareness of how high the costs could be. He reviewed his findings again, noting how each piece of evidence pointed to something deliberate, something orchestrated. But by whom? And why? These questions loomed over him like shadows he couldn't escape. The next morning, Barron decided to take his investigation offline, fearing that his digital trail had already been compromised. Armed with a phone and a notepad, he set out to interview local residents in some of the worst-hit areas. He started in Agora Hills, where several homes had been destroyed. Many evacuees were still camped out in temporary shelters, relying on donated supplies and waiting for news about their properties. Barron approached an older man named Jack, who was sitting in a chair outside a community center. Jack had lived in the area for decades and had seen his share of fires. "This one was different," Jack told Barron, his voice hoarse from days of breathing hot air. "Fires don't usually burn like this. They're erratic, sure, but this one was like a straight shot." When Barron asked about Solvista Holdings, Jack tensed. "Yeah, I've heard that name. They've been buying up property around here for months, left and right. People didn't think much of it until the fires started." Jack's words sent a chill down Barron's spine. He thanked the man and moved on, but similar stories began to emerge as he spoke to more residents. Several recalled seeing strange activity in the days leading up to the fires. Low-flying drones, unfamiliar utility trucks, and even some nighttime digging at odd hours. Barron's next stop was the town of Thousand Oaks, where he met a woman named Elena who had been evacuated from her family's farm. She showed him a series of photos she had taken on her cell phone, including one that immediately caught Barron's attention. An area of land carved into perfect circles, as if something had exploded in multiple spots simultaneously. Elena hesitated before uploading another photo. It was dark, but unforgettable. A drone hovering over her property, equipped with what appeared to be a small cylinder attached to its underside. "I tried to report this to the authorities," she said, "but they said they were too busy to investigate. I guess they didn't care." Barron felt a sinking feeling in his stomach as he put the pieces together. Could these drones have been used to start the fires? The idea seemed far-fetched, but not impossible, given the precision of the ignition points. He decided to dig deeper into Solvista Holdings, starting with its leadership. That night, he visited the Los Angeles Public Library, where he accessed corporate archives and news reports. Solvista Holdings' CEO was a man named Victor Grayson, relatively low-profile figure with ties to several other energy and real estate companies. Barron uncovered allegations against Grayson for environmental violations, including illegal fracking operations and land contamination. One article described Grayson's aggressive push for land redevelopment projects in fire-prone areas, offering relaxed regulations for rapid construction after fires. The more Barron learned, the clearer the picture became. The fires weren't just a tragedy, they were an opportunity. If someone could acquire large tracts of land quickly, they could rebuild at huge profits. But as Barron gathered more information, he couldn't ignore the growing feeling that he was being followed. The black car had reappeared the day before, parked near the library entrance when he arrived. And now, as he walked out with a briefcase full of documents, he saw the car again, slowly following him as he walked to his car. Barron was getting closer to the truth, but the closer he got, the more dangerous his mission became. Barron's heart was pounding as he drove through the dark streets of Los Angeles. The black car was still in his rearview mirror, its lights and presence menacing. He had to think fast. Making a series of turns, he drove through dark streets and finally turned into a dead end. He stopped near the exit and hid behind a pillar, watching as the SUV drove past without stopping. Relieved but agitated, Barron gathered up the folder of documents he had taken from the library. The evidence he had collected was disturbing, but he didn't know where to turn with this information. The authorities had already dismissed him, and sharing it online could put him in more danger. Barron decided to call someone with more resources, a journalist. He remembered a respected investigative journalist named Linda Moreno, known for exposing corruption and corporate wrongdoing. After some quick research, he found her contact information and sent her an encrypted email summarizing what he had discovered. The next day, Linda agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Pasadena. She listened intently as he described the timeline of the fires, the suspicious land purchases, and the possible involvement of Solvista Holdings. "This is huge," she said. "If what you're saying is true, it could implicate some very powerful people." Linda promised to help Barron verify his findings and offered to use her connections to investigate Solvista's activities further. But she also warned him, "These stories can make enemies. Be careful, Barron. There's a price on your head." Their conversation was interrupted by a loud noise outside. Barron turned to see a car speeding by. Its tires screeched as it made a sharp turn. Linda's face went pale. "This is no coincidence," she said. "We need to move." Over the next few days, Linda and Barron worked tirelessly to uncover more evidence. Linda used her sources to obtain internal Solvista emails that revealed plans to expedite rebuilding permits in fire-affected areas. One email in particular stood out. It was an exchange between Victor Grayson and a colleague discussing accelerating the timeline and ensuring that sites were acquired. The implications were clear. Someone was intentionally starting the fires to force residents out and make way for rebuilding projects. The audacity of the scheme left Barron and Linda furious and determined to expose the truth. But their efforts did not go unnoticed. One night, when Barron returned to his hotel, he found his room ransacked. Papers were scattered, windows were open, and his computer was missing. A single note sat on the desk: "Stop investigating." Barron immediately called Linda, who advised him to stay with her until they could decide what to do next. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "But this just confirms that we're on the right track." Despite the threats, they pressed on. Linda began crafting an exposé, gathering the evidence they had collected. The story was poised to reveal Solvista's corruption and the destruction of communities for profit. But as the deadline approached, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The walls were closing in, and he knew that exposing the truth would come at a cost. On the day Linda's article was scheduled to be published, Barron woke up to an alert on his burner phone. The encrypted email account he had used to communicate with Linda had been compromised. Someone had accessed the drafts they had been working on. In a panic, he called Linda, but the call went straight to voicemail. Desperate, he grabbed his things and ran to her apartment. When he arrived, he found the door ajar. Inside, her workspace was in disarray. The walls, once covered with notes and presentations about Solvista's activities, were bare. Her phone, camera, and notepads were gone. A single sticky note was left behind on her desk. In capital letters, it read, "You have been warned." Barron's heart raced. Linda was gone, and so was most of the evidence they had collected. The only thing left was the folder of documents he had kept with him the entire time. He immediately left the apartment, downloading the folder of documents to a secure cloud drive, but he knew he wouldn't be safe for long. Desperate for help, he decided to contact his father. Although he was reluctant to involve his family, the situation had escalated beyond his control. "Dad," he said into the phone, his voice shaking. "I need your help. This is bigger than I thought." Donald Trump, known for his connections and influence, listened intently as Barron explained the depth of what he had learned. "You have courage, son," his father finally said. "But you're right. This is dangerous. I'm going to make some calls, but you need to keep your head down. And Barron, don't trust anyone." That night, Barron received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. It contained a link called Proof of Operation Phoenix. The file included damning evidence, detailed plans for orchestrating the fires, schematics for the drones, and emails from Solvista executives discussing payments to complicit employees. The message ended with an ominous line. "Release this and you will never see darkness again." Barron knew he couldn't keep this to himself. He sent the file to Linda's editor at the investigative network where she worked, along with the story they had worked on before she disappeared. Within hours, the story had broken on major news networks. The expose revealed the calculated destruction of communities for profit, implicating Solvista executives and several high-ranking officials in California. The public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted outside Solvista's offices, demanding justice for the families displaced by the fires. Federal authorities launched an investigation, and Victor Grayson's face became a symbol of rage and corruption. But the revelation did not come without cost. Barron's life changed as he became the target of scrutiny and media attention. His father's lawyers advised him to stay out of the spotlight, but Barron refused to back down. "People need to know the truth," he told reporters in one of his public appearances. Despite threats and challenges, Barron's actions led to reforms in land acquisitions in areas vulnerable to fires. Solvista's assets were frozen and several of its executives were convicted. Victor Grayson, however, remained at large, having reportedly fled the country to avoid prosecution. But even as justice began to unfold, Barron could not shake the warning he had received. The shadow of those behind the operation grew longer, a reminder that exposing the truth often comes at a high price. In the weeks following the expose, the world watched as the scandal unfolded. Reporters detailed the investigations into Solvista Holdings, the arrests of complicit officials, and the growing movement to reform fire prevention and response strategies. For the first time, the public began to view the fires not as an uncontrollable natural disaster, but as a calculated and deliberate act. Barron, however, stayed out of the scandal. The initial media frenzy over his involvement brought threats and harassment. For his safety, his family arranged for him to leave Los Angeles and move to a safe location until the situation calmed down. Although Barron appreciated the gesture, he struggled with the weight of everything he had learned. He spent his days reflecting on the lives destroyed by the fires, the families who lost their homes, the firefighters who risked their lives, and the communities that would never be the same again. Yet amid the tragedy, there was a sense of hope. Barron saw for the first time how ordinary people could make a difference, even when the odds were stacked against them. One afternoon, he received an email from a woman he had met at one of the camps. Her family's home had been destroyed by the fires, but thanks to a public outcry and donations inspired by the exhibit, they were able to rebuild. "Thank you for what you did," the email read. "You gave us hope when we thought we had none." The message reaffirmed Barron's belief in the power of truth. While his path had been marked by danger, it had also shown him the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. He realized that his actions had inspired more than just shame. They had inspired change. In the months that followed, new legislation was passed to regulate land acquisitions in high-risk areas, ensuring stricter oversight and accountability. A task force was also created to investigate the use of drones and other technologies in criminal activity. These measures would not erase the damage that had been done, but they were a step toward preventing future tragedies. Barron's experience left a lasting impression on him. He decided to channel his energy into activism, using his platform to advocate for environmental justice and corporate accountability. Although his life was forever changed by the events surrounding the fires, he felt a new sense of purpose. But Barron knew it wasn't just his fight. The truth matters, he said in an interview months later, and it's our responsibility to make sure it comes out. The story of the Los Angeles fires is a reminder of the power of courage and conviction. In a world where greed and corruption often go unpunished, it takes individuals willing to ask the hard questions to uncover the truth. If Barron's story has inspired you, consider what actions you can take to make a difference in your own community. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories that matter. Together, we can shine a light on issues that deserve attention.